All right, so this is our writing objective test item and portfolio assessment over chapter 7 and 10. And this is our professional development session that we created. I am Kyle Bailey.
I am Russell Bennett.
I'm Clifton Drummond.
I'm Lakita Zachary.
All right, so starting us off. So here in this PD, we're here to emphasize the significance of assessments and shaping student learning and measuring educational outcomes. So with writing practical items, design and portfolio assessments are essential for maintaining the two things of reliability and validity. So this session is aimed to equip our educators with skills to design fair, unbiased, and high quality assessments. So making sure the assessments are top of the top. So the first thing we're going to talk about in this session is what are objective test items. All right. So objective test items are structured to minimize subjectivity, ensure consistency in grading. So this provides efficient ways to assess knowledge, but it must be well constructed to avoid misleading results. Objective does not always mean easy. So anytime that you're doing these test items, don't always think easy in your head. These are well designed questions that can challenge high order thinking, so making sure that they are actually going through with thinking through each question. So the next thing we're going to talk about is true false items and their best practices. So when we're designing these true or false questions, all right? So true or false questions should avoid absolutes like always or never. You don't never want to put those two things in your true false questions. They should always be well constructed, true false questions, and require students to apply knowledge than just guess, or because of this wording, I think this is true, or because of this wording, I think this is false. Students always have a 50% chance of guessing it correctly, which they do, but this format makes it less reliable for assessing complex knowledge. All right. So if we want to use a real world example, if you were a history teacher, the way you shouldn't write a true false question is the American Revolution has always supported by all colonists. All right. So this is written very poorly. A better way we can put this true false question is some colonists known as loyalists opposed to the American Revolution. True or false?
All right, so similar to true and false questions, we must make sure that we watch the format and the creation of the question. We want to make sure that there's a level of uniformity and a level of synergy. All right, so therefore, when we are designing appropriate questions, we want to make sure that the matching items are good for assessing relationships, make sure that we are understanding the concepts between them, and then, of course, they can also assess classifications and definitions. All right, so we must appropriately design and arrange matching items with logical order. Um, in the directions, for example, we can also say and specify the basis for matching, such as if the options can be used multiple times, as well as if be used again. Each description in the list should be numbered, and then of course each option should have a letter. All right, when we think about multiple choice questions, contrary to our belief, multiple choice questions are actually really good for assessing the level of taxonomy. They're really good and they have the ability of assessing higher level of taxonomy. We should use common core state standards and of course our normal standards, an emphasis of higher level thinking with using multiple choice practices. Therefore, in the creation of multiple choice items, we need to start with the objectives, which can measure analysis, application, and comprehension when creating those items. All right, so when we use multiple choice questions, best practices, we should make sure the stem of the item clearly formulates a problem. And then also make sure that there's only one answer. We want to avoid those all of the aboves, as well as we want to use sparingly those none of the aboves. All right, be sure the distractor choices are plausible, eliminating grammatical errors, and then of course also rotate the correct answer. If wanting to make multi-choice questions a little bit more difficult, we can make the choices similar in content so that we can kind of get to the higher level of taxonomy. All right, when we think about completion items and best practices, Completion items are really good for assessing a specific fact or specific knowledge for students. It will allow the students to recall and provide missing information. So therefore, we should require a single word in the missing blank if possible, making sure that the students examine and understands the problem. With too many blanks, we're losing their readability and the comprehension. Make sure there is only one possible answer, of course. All right, so in the interactive activity, as we are looking over and going over our assessments, we can use this interactive activity to review sample test items with common mistakes and to go over our own assessments, making sure that they have validity and reliability when given the assessment. It is a great tool for also avoiding gender and cultural or racial stereotypes and other biases when creating our assessments.
Okay, the guidelines for writing test items. We want to make sure that the alignment and instructional goals are intact. Test questions should directly reflect what students were taught. This also ensures validity. The test accurately measures students' knowledge of the intended material rather than the unrelated concept. You want to pre-write the test and revise it. Writing items in advance allows students to be careful. Allows time for careful review, reducing bias and ensuring clarity. This process helps eliminate unintended advantages or disadvantages for certain student groups. You want to avoid ambiguity. That's vaguely or poorly worded questions that confuse students, leading to responses that do not accurately reflect their understanding. You want clear, precise wording and essential for valid results. You also want to assess the taught content. This test should measure students' comprehension of the material covered in class, not unrelated or overly obscure information. This ensures fairness and meaningful assessment of learning. You want to avoid trick questions. Trick questions can mislead students and do not provide a true measure of their knowledge. If effective assessment should focus on evaluating understanding rather than testing a student ability to decipher misleading wording. Then slide 10 talks about using Bloom's taxonomy for test items. It's 6 levels, which is remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. When you remember, you define terms like metacognition. When you apply, you solve a real world problem using learning concept. When you evaluate, you compare those theories and determine which is more effective. And then the portfolio assessment overview, portfolio assessment is a collection of student work, demonstrating learning progress. You want to, you have over the holistic view of students' abilities, unlike single test scores. And you also want to encourage students to reflect and self-assessment.
Now, as we're moving in and we want to talk about these portfolio assessments that we're doing and what's the purpose of it. One, the portfolios are used for progress tracking that show the growth over time of each student that we have in our classroom. It's a communication tool for parents and students to help understand the content of what they're learning. And it's also a grading and assessment that measures skills beyond just multiple choice and true false questions. Some of the benefits of portfolios are it encourages creativity out of the students. They can express learning in different ways and what works for them. It supports differentiation, allows students to work at their own pace, and it develops critical thinking and problem solving skills and helps students reflect on their own learning. Now, ensuring validity in a portfolio assessment, how can we make portfolios fair and reliable? All right, we want to clearly define the purpose of the portfolio and focus on key skills, writing, critical thinking, problem solving, as well as using rubrics for objective evaluation, and then also aggregate scores to fairly to ensure consistency of the portfolio. We also want to look at some challenges and solutions to portfolios, which could be subjectivity and grading. We want to make sure with portfolios we're using a clear rubric, and it's identify what we're looking for in that portfolio. We want to make sure that it's not time consuming. We want to set clear deadlines and checkpoints, and then we want to make sure we have ensure student engagement and allow student choice in the portfolio completion. As far as developing and scoring portfolios, we want to make sure we decide on a purpose. All right, it's progress tracking, communication, or grading. We will identify key skills, writing, problem solving, and metacognition. Make sure our rubrics are used to evaluate drafts and final products, and then aggregate portfolio scores systematically using weighting averages.
All right, so here's our conclusion and here's our key takeaways from this PD session. All right. So first thing is make sure you choose the right test format based on your objectives. Depending on what your objective is for those students that you are testing, you want to have the right format for those students. So again, when we went into true or false, or we went into objective test items, you want to make sure you have the right format based on what you want to test your students on.
Definitely follow best practices to avoid common mistakes. Know the format of the questions that you're looking to use with the objective to make sure the students can get the correct type of comprehension from the question.
You also want to make sure you design the test items that challenge the students at multiple cognitive levels.
And lastly, portfolios provide a deeper and more holistic assessment method. They are powerful tools for student assessment, but they require clear expectations, structured evaluation, and thoughtful implementation. At this point in time in a professional development setting, we would like to take questions from our audience. But since this is our own audience, we appreciate you taking the time to watch our presentation.
And lastly, we just have our references, which was the actual book, the Bloom's Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, and lastly, the National Institute of Educational Testing Best Practices. Thanks.